So episode 4 of The Last Ride Undertaker documentary dropped. I watched it and it was pretty good. It was actually better than part 3. Part 3 was just treading the water. It was just kind of like a repeat of part 2. But part 4 seemed like we're actually moving forward towards the end. So in this part, we actually learned how much effort went into the Undertaker character. And, Bruce Pritchard, jeez. I don't know how much of this is bullshit because you never really can tell with Pritchard. But he talked about doing, actual research. He researched death and dying and caskets and undertakers and stuff like that, and had blueprints made up so they could build the caskets for Kamala, and all the work that he put into as far as the vignettes. Now I know that Pritchard does do the vignettes, so that's probably true. How much hands-on effort he put into the character, who knows? But that I found that to be tremendously interesting, because we know that the Undertaker is a big, as far as the character is concerned, it's a pretty big project to get the look right, get the voice right, get the aesthetics correct, and hanging out. And they talked about hanging out in mortuaries and graveyards and stuff, and how much fun it was. And it had a nice little part from Paul Bearer in it, and how he did all the talking and stuff like that. And I didn't get to the part of the story where I like, more than anything else that took place in this documentary, this is the part of the story that really I found the most interesting, because I think it dovetails nicely with the Ric Flair documentary that dropped. What was it, last week? I'm sorry, June 7th, maybe, after the In Your House pay-per-view. There was the Ric Flair documentary. And I was going to do a documentary on Ric Flair. I was going to do a notes on Ric Flair. Then I decided not to do it because I wanted to do something else. And I still may do it, because here we're talking about identity. And we have to talk about specifically how important is your identity, or how much of your identity is tied into what you do. In other words, Ric Flair lived the gimmick for 36 years. And it was incredibly difficult, even at his old age, for him to walk away. And you have Undertaker now going through the same thing, but he's talking about how much effort went into this character, how long the character has been going on. It's been going on for 20 some odd years, and he can't let it go. Now, it's not that he can't let the character go, because he's doing documentaries and stuff now. But that's really what the first part of the documentary was about, was him not wanting to let the character be exposed. So he turned down a bunch of opportunities in order to protect the identity of The Undertaker, as to make The Undertaker and Mark Calloway one person. And of course, a lot of people are really interested in the whole, well, he signed up to do StarCast, and then he didn't know AEW the AEW was involved with StarCast, and he was working with a team who just signed him up for some stuff, and he just agreed to do it. And then Vince McMahon called him like, "Hey, what are you doing?" And some people find that part a little juicy, but to me, I kind of figured that was the case anyway. Most of these people don't do their own bookings. They have a booking agent. They have agents to do this type of shit. They come to them with things. They say yes, they say no, and they go on about their business. It makes sense that he wouldn't know anything about StarCast and how it's connected with AEW. No matter what Conrad says about they're not connected, Roll Tide, fuck that, okay? It's connected. There's not a StarCast event. I don't think there's ever been a StarCast event that was not connected to an AEW pay-per-view. I don't believe it. So it's bullshit, okay, until otherwise. But it makes sense to me that he was protecting the character, and that not only he was really, and this part I thought was interesting too, that people kept trying to get him to break character in public. JBL's cutting promos on him, trying to get him to break. Kurt Angle's trying to hug him, and Booker T's trying to get him to do spinneronis. And I remember some of this stuff, because some of this footage is stuff that they showed before. Like, I've never seen the Kurt Angle hug thing. I've never seen that before, so that was interesting. But it was, the point of it all was, he took the character so seriously that he was protecting it. And that he's been protecting his character for so long that, he's finally now just sort of, putting it down. And that's how this documentary came to be. And that's how, he's able to open up and do more outside the ring. And I just couldn't every time I saw him after, they pushed the control of the character part, I kept saying, like, this is a part of his identity now. He's lived it for so long. It's a part of his identity. Just like Ric Flair. It's just is who they are now. Like, they're always, like Mick Foley said it later in the documentary, that he hasn't called Undertaker Mark in years. So just imagine how other people probably have not been calling him by his real name. He has been lost in this character for, who knows how long. He said he dedicated himself to the character once he kind of committed to doing it, that he was going to do the character 24/7 and really protect it. And he protected it for so long, like I said, it's pretty much who he is now. So like I said, it's really a good question of how much of our identity is who we are. Some people have a very difficult time quitting a job because they can't see themselves doing anything else. Doctors and lawyers, people who spend decades in school, they take their job very seriously. They take the label of doctor, the label of lawyer very seriously. Especially in unionized workforces like trade unions, those people take their jobs very seriously. They take a lot of pride in being bricklayers and being carpenters and being painters. That's who they are. Truckers is another one. They have, and you can tell that people have a very serious attachment to their job, and how much is important to their identity is when they lose their job, they commit suicide. And that's a big thing as far as men are concerned with job loss. It's not just, it's a loss of pride for one thing, but it's also a loss of identity, because you're not really sure who you are, especially if you've been doing it for a really long time. This is why, like my granddad worked at Ford for 60 years. There's no reason for him to work at Ford for 60 years, but he is at the point where he didn't know what he would do without getting up and going to this place. Even if he was too old, he couldn't see, he could barely drive himself. He just couldn't see himself doing anything else. What else could I do? Like, what else could I really do? I'm used to getting up, going to Ford, so I'm gonna get up and go to Ford. And they usually try, they used to force people to retire, and eventually he ended up retiring. He just didn't have a choice. He's 80 something, but your identity is tied up into what you do to such a degree that people have killed themselves because they lost their job, because, something happened and they ruined their career. They don't know what else to do. They can't start over. And I don't think Undertaker has that extreme of a problem that if he's going to leave, he's going to kill himself. That's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is that as long as he's physically able to do it, he wants to continue doing it, because not just because he wants the storybook ending, but also because he's just used to doing it. And my evidence of that came up later in the documentary when he says how he felt about missing WrestleMania 35. So he missed WrestleMania 35. He wasn't booked for the show, so he didn't bring his gear. I love this part of the documentary too, because I loved a lot of his conversations with Vince, because this documentary is just as much about Vince as it is about Undertaker, because we really see a lot of how Vince interacts with people, and this is his oldest friend / employee, and they had an interesting conversation later in the documentary, but I'll get to that later. But in this part, Undertaker is like, I'm not booked for WrestleMania, so I didn't bring my gear. So he gets to experience access with his daughter, and I thought this was really fun. I thought it was nice, because for the first time in a long time, you actually get to hear a little bit about how Michelle McCool added to the Divas division, or the women's division, because people for a long time kind of skipped over the Michelle McCool, Layla L, Candice Michelle days. At the Divas, quote unquote, they're frowned upon, even though some of them could actually work. So it's people kind of just skip from Trish Stratus to Charlotte, and they skip over all that stuff. So I thought it was interesting that he was like, he wanted his daughter to see how much her mom added to the business, and I thought that was really good. But he said that when he was sitting at Gorilla during WrestleMania 35, he really had the itch. that he really felt like he should have been out there. And I'm saying to myself, like thinking to myself, like I can understand that. I can understand it. You're used to it this particular day of the year because he usually doesn't work any other time. So this particular day of the year is your time. It's almost like your birthday. You're looking forward to it. And now, just like a birthday kind of, when you kind of grow up and birthdays aren't that important anymore, it's just kind of like another day. WrestleMania, it has not become just another day to him yet, and he kind of has to get over the hump in order to do that. And I found that to be gut wrenching, because I'm a wrestling fan. I've always been a wrestling fan. But there was times where where WrestleMania was the number one thing. Like it's back to being like the number one thing. Like I don't work on days where there's WrestleMania. Like I will not. I will not. Okay. Like some people don't want to work after the Super Bowl. I really don't want to work after WrestleMania. And I really don't feel that way about any other type of event, or holiday. Like I really don't care about working on Christmas. I don't really care about working on Thanksgiving. I've done both of those things. To be quite honest, working on Thanksgiving and working on Christmas is not fun. It's not. It's really bad. But nothing sucked more than having to work on WrestleMania. That fucking sucks. Okay. So I understand where he was coming from as far as certain days and certain events are a big deal. And he felt like this was a big deal. So he missed WrestleMania. He wasn't booked for the show. This is WrestleMania 35, by the way. So 2019. And which oddly enough, WWE actually called WrestleMania 35. Usually they would have just, I know that Vince is kind of wonky on numbers now. Like he usually would have been like WrestleMania 2019, but it was actually labeled WrestleMania 35. Interesting. Maybe the old man is slipping, or people are just doing things and he don't know it. But we actually get to see that he was booked for Raw. And he didn't know that Vince was going to ask him to do Raw, so he didn't bring his gear. So they have this interesting dynamic between him and Vince, where he attacks Vince. They play fighting, of course. And then Vince says, a real pro would have brought his gear, in the Vince McMahon voice, And then Undertaker says, a real pro would have booked me to start with. And I thought that was really dope. And Vince was like, like he took that one on the chin. But so he did the Raw after WrestleMania, which is basically him chokeslamming the Tombstone and Elias to set up the Elias's interference in the Extreme Rules and all that type of stuff, which is a match I completely forgot about. Then we get to Triple H pitching the Saudi Arabia match to him, and Undertaker said he took the match because Goldberg has such a high stature that and it's a rare opportunity for him to wrestle somebody he's never wrestled before. And somebody who is a legend who he's never wrestled before. So he's like, you very rarely at my age get these opportunities. So he really wanted to do it. And I was kind of upset that there was no Goldberg in this documentary, because I really would have liked to hear Goldberg's side of the story. But apparently Goldberg hit his head on that post, bloodied him. He was all over the place. Then he dropped Undertaker on his back, almost like in a brain buster. They talked about how bad that hurt his back and how disappointed he was. And he said that, he started to think, like, is it me? He started second guessing himself, started being concerned, started being worried that he was the cause of all this negative stuff. Because, apparently every time he go to Saudi Arabia, it's going to be a fucking travesty and he's going to hurt himself. So it wasn't him. Of course, it was Goldberg, obviously. So we get to Extreme Rules. And Extreme Rules, we find out he's teaming with Roman Reigns and he's going to wrestle Drew McIntyre and Shane McMahon. And I forgot all about this match. I honestly didn't remember this match happened. But we see a lot of people talking at this time and talking about how difficult it is to let go. And Undertaker says it's not about the money, it's about the passion. And that he just really wants to continue doing this. And Edge says it's about, surprise, ego, it's a desire to help the company. And Triple H kind of like says that, the business is addictive. And he talks about how addictive the business is. And I think that that's true too, because, Terry Funk has not retired. Fucking Jerry Lawler had a heart attack. He still wrestles. I saw Mil Mascaras still wrestling. Okay. Yes, I literally saw Mil Mascaras, who has got to be 70 something still wrestling. I know the Briscoes. I think somebody told me the Briscoes still wrestle. Or Jack Briscoe, one of the two of them still wrestles. And it's absolutely insane. These people are in their 70s. Ric Flair still wants to wrestle. He's in his 70s. So Undertaker is not that old compared to those guys. Compared to the fucking Briscoes and Ric Flair, he's not that old. But he's a guy in his 50s, you know? So it's difficult for him to let it go. And it was a really touching thing that he says in this part of the documentary, where he says he whispered to Shawn or something. He says he's had conversations with Shawn where he told Shawn, "I should have left with you." And I was like, fuck, because that's so true. What if that would have been Undertaker's last match? That if he would have said, all right, I had this classic with Shawn Michaels, I said I'm done. You know, I can't top this. I'm not even going to try. I'm done. Then we wouldn't have gotten the matches with Triple H, which I enjoyed. You know, the kind of the matches with Brock, which, you know, I didn't really enjoy most of the matches with Brock. I enjoyed Undertaker's matches with Brock during the first run, you know, where they had the chain match and they had the Hell in a Cell, which was god fucking awesome. Oh, fuck. I may have to watch that match again. It was awesome. But since Brock's return, I really haven't really enjoyed any of the matches they had together. They've been okay, but they haven't been to the standard of young Brock versus Undertaker. But it was interesting seeing all these guys who most of them are retiring. Like, this was Batista's last show at WrestleMania 19, WrestleMania 35. What the fuck? I got 2019 in my head. So that was Batista's last show, and he's like, you know, he just wants Undertaker to not get hurt, and he really wants him to retire. Of course, you know, but he said like the business is like his child, and he's kind of worried about what's going to happen to it if he's not there anymore. And I think about that too, you know, like what is going to happen. And then, but I think that's also tied into the whole concept of, you know, is it ego, you know, but not really, because he understands that it's over, you know, that, you know, he's got fewer matches in front of him than he does behind him. But, you know, I like that concept though, that he's been the caretaker of this, not just, you know, the WWE itself, as Triple H says, but of everything, you know, the entire wrestling business, as one of the most respected people ever. You know, he has sort of been the caretaker of, you know, what kayfabe is and what the business is. He has been that guy for so long that it's difficult for him to walk away from that, you know, to see like who else is going to be that guy, especially in today's world where people are breaking kayfabe literally every time they open their eyes. They can't wait to break kayfabe. You know, they're breaking kayfabe so goddamn much that there's almost no kayfabe to talk about in the first place. So they have the match at Extreme Rules, and Undertaker says the match went on fine. He wasn't hurt, he wasn't injured, he felt good afterwards. And he talked about, he went to Vince and he whispered to Vince, like, I'm done. And Vince kind of was like, like, you seem to be doing okay, blah, 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 blah. And Undertaker just said, like, hey, look, you know, for my long term, I can't do this anymore. I think I'm done. I think it's over. And then Vince kind of like, we'll talk about it, pal. We'll talk about it. And then Undertaker just kind of put his foot down and was like, no. I think this is it. And then Vince was like, oh, all right. I'll follow your lead. And he was content for, you know, all of 15 minutes, it seemed, because like he was still, you know, pumping adrenaline through his body from the crowd reaction and feeling good after his match, because he finally had a match where everything went well and he wasn't injured and he wasn't hurt. And, you know, even though after the match he told Vince he was done, he wasn't done. And this is where, you know, we introduce AJ Styles, because him and AJ Styles, they are buddies. They both drink Diet Dr. Pepper. And at the end of the documentary, we see Undertaker and AJ Styles about to discuss our idea of them having a match together. So an addendum to this documentary is that Mick Foley did an interview with Alex McCarthy from TalkSport. Now, normally I would read the interview out, but I decided to just give you the bare bones of it this time. Mick Foley talked about his own troubles with retirement. For starters, he talked about, well, he tried to retire. He was only like 34 or something like that. And he didn't know what to do with all the spare time that he had, So he was like, well, even though he had took time to write books and he wanted to get off the road, he felt like he had this perfect storybook ending. But he felt like he just couldn't deal with, not being paid. He was like, you're not making any money because you're not working. You have this specific skill set of the things that you know how to do, and you're not using it, and you're still young enough to be you have to pay bills and all that type of stuff. And yes, your injuries and things like that. And but he also said he enjoyed, so he found the right mix, quote unquote, was to have a very limited schedule where you can work and have something to look forward to or to train towards, but also still have time at home. So you're not on the full-time grind. And I think Undertaker's been on that mixed schedule for 15 fucking years. Like he's been on that schedule since like 2005. He hasn't worked weekly in a long time. But I think he was working weekly in 2005, but he had like extended vacations for injury and stuff like that. But Foley also talked about it, the financials of it, because part of the reason why, to double back to what my granddad, part of the reason why he doesn't quit his job is because hey, he might be able to make more money working than he could off his pension. When you don't feel like maybe you don't feel as old as you are. And maybe he does. Undertaker does feel as old as he is, but he's still a young man. Like in sports, he's old. He's ancient in sports. Because again, in most sports and most, football leagues and basketball leagues, it's unheard of for you to be 42 and still playing, let alone 50. So, to be an athlete or at least an athletic endeavor like pro wrestling, he's a dinosaur. So so it's kind of difficult because you start talking about this guy who, again, people want to see, people would love to see him, even if it's just doing a choke slam, and he's still let's say he got a good 20 years ahead of him physically. Then how do you sit home for 20 years, man, and do nothing? Like, yes, he's got kids, he's got a wife and he's got that type of stuff, but man, that's a tough, to look forward to nothing, to have to try to figure out what you're doing from day to day. Like, I know that Kurt Angle, he was asked, he said that WWE suggested that he manage Matt Riddle, that he comes in, but he says like I have businesses and stuff like that to do. And I know Undertaker probably had businesses before, but he's also probably got that good alimony. He'd been married twice before Michelle McCool, and alimony is a motherfucker because they got Ric Flair too. That's one of the reasons Ric Flair couldn't walk away. He got married 3 times. So he's paying alimony. He said like I was paying alimony to 3 different women. That shit should be illegal, by the way. Having to pay alimony to a motherfucker, like, why? Why are you taking care of a motherfucker who can clearly take care of themselves? If they can lay down and fuck, they can get a job, okay? You having to take care of other people is some fucking bullshit. That's kind of what, that's some fucking bullshit. I'm sorry. I don't want to go full, red pill on anybody, but I'm 100% against alimony. 100%. But that shit is also one of the reasons why athletes have such a difficult time, because they do have to pay alimony and child support payments and all that type of stuff. Undertaker do have kids by these other women. I think they're adults now, but we're not going to obviously get too deep into his family life to the point where we're talking about past wives and everything. But that stuff counts and it matters. It's the unseen problem in a lot of people's lives to why they work so hard or why they work so much or why they can't retire or, because they have to pay other people off. You got debts, you got all types of problems. And, as you get older, you make less, because you're worth less, not worthless, but worth less than you were when you were in your prime. even except in wrestling, you seem to get more valuable as you go older because you have brand, you're a brand and everything. Basketball, sometimes in basketball, you become worth more as you get older, but usually an athlete gets worth less as they get older because more wear and tear on the body. First time you get a surgery, you could pretty much say, fuck a lot of the money that you would have made. But, you know, things, I love talking about this documentary and this article that I read about how millionaire athletes go broke, and that alimony and that child support, that should do it to you every fucking time. So I think it's a mixture of identity, that he's just tied up so much of his identity into the Undertaker character, you can't let it go. It's probably some of the financials too. I'm never going to talk about it, but if Ric Flair was openly just like, hey, I gotta pay alimony to 3 different women, I know Undertaker's been married twice before Michelle McCool. That might be the case too. Maybe somebody is got their hands in his pockets. I don't think he's broke or anything like that. But who knows? You never know. There's always the unseen hand. There's always an unseen hand. But I love the documentary. I think the documentary is great. Hopefully this boneyard match thing is going to be like where he announces his retirement, and maybe that's really what's going to happen is in this particular part 5, he's going to say, do this match with AJ Styles, and then that's it. And then they did the boneyard match for WrestleMania 36, and maybe he does more boneyard matches. Who knows? But what do you guys think of this documentary series? Have you been watching it and keeping up? If not, you probably should. It's a really good documentary series. Part 3, I mean, it's dragging a little bit because they try to, but there's still more there, as far as his search for redemption. And now he's got sort of a good match but it's a tag match. So now he kind of wants to say, maybe I could do it one-on-one, but who knows? But let me know what you guys think in the comment section about this documentary series and about my thoughts about it. Thanks for listening. Thank you guys, and I'll talk to you guys later.